Hey everybody, Mr. Eric here, and today we're answering the question of hip or Zen. So, I've got both these IFI products that I purchased myself. I purchased them used. I think I purchased the Hip-dac for 75 or 80 bucks, and I purchased the Zen DAC for I think maybe 90 or $100. I can't really remember, but anyway, I got a decent deal on both of them. And I'm trying to kind of fill a niche in my audio needs. Now, originally I purchased the Zen DAC because I wanted to use it at work to, one, be my headphone amplifier, but also be a preamp for like the speakers that are in my room at school because I'm a teacher. And so I'll talk a little bit about that experience here in a little bit. And then the Hip-dac, I'm looking for an amp that will suit my needs for just like around the house when I'm away from my desk, which is more and more moving forward. So how do these things work for those applications, and just how do they sound overall? What are the differences between them? That's what we're going to address in this video here. Before we get into that, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more headphone audio related type things. That's what this channel is about, and that's mainly what I do. So thank you ahead of time if you would do that for me. Okay, let's dig into each of these devices. We'll look at what we get with each of them, and we will look at just their overall builds and features and things like that. So these are actually pretty similar devices in a lot of ways. They can both be powered straight off of USB or even OTG cables, so you can power one off of an iPad or an iPhone. Actually, the Hip-dac has a built-in battery, whereas the Zen DAC runs off of whatever source's power that you're running to it. Now, interestingly enough, if we look at this, the Zen DAC does actually have a power supply port, but it doesn't come with one, which is kind of interesting. So I've read that if you put an external power supply on this, it does improve the sound quality. I did not test that feature out. I have only used it either from my computer's USB or with my OTG cable from my iPhone. So what do you get with the Zen DAC? Well, you get a DAC/headphone amplifier. And what's interesting about this is you get 1/4 inch and 4.4 balanced outputs for headphones. And in addition to that, you get a 4.4 balanced output, which is rather unique for any device, really, let alone one priced at like $130. This can be used as a pre-out, and you can run that either fixed or you can run it variable, which means you can choose to have a set volume level coming out of this guy, or you can use the volume knob on the Zen DAC to control like powered speakers or something like that, which was the application that I was trying to use it for. A couple of other features that are pretty typical of IFI devices are power match, which is supposed to do some fancy work where it reads the impedance of your headphones and tries to match up with those. And then true bass, which is a bass boost feature. All in all, I feel like it's a pretty well-featured, well-built product for $130. My only real complaint, well, I have two complaints with it, but the build complaint, if you can hear that, is these buttons are a little loose on the front and they like rattle around. I mean, they're fine, but if you're moving it around, it does feel a little cheap and gives the illusion of like there's something rattling around inside of this, which I don't like. But if it's just sitting in place, that's really a non-issue. The other issue that I had with it and why it didn't work out for me as my device at work is because the preamps are always on. So personally, I would have liked to have been able to switch that off somehow, because what that means is when you have headphones plugged in, it also plays through whatever speakers you have hooked up to it if they're on or powered. And in my application, I couldn't easily shut my speakers off. So that pretty much was a deal breaker for me as far as using this device. I ended up replacing that with a Fola 2 that I got a really good deal on, and I'd much prefer its system to where if you have headphones plugged in, then it turns off the preamp outs. And if you unplug the headphones, then the preamps turn on. That works better for me. Your application may vary. So that works better for me, but your application needs may be different to where you want them both on all the time. I could see there being situations like that, like especially if you have speakers that you can easily turn on and off. So that's the overview of this. It doesn't come with a lot of stuff, but it does come with a IFI seems to like to use these little blue USB cables, and then it comes with just a little set of RCAs, which are nothing to write home about, but I appreciate they include them. So let's look at the Hip-dac now before we get into sound. So the Hip-dac is, you can kind of see the size difference here. It is really a nice compact size, and fits very handily in your pocket or really anywhere, to be perfectly honest with you. It does very much resemble like a whiskey flask, which I think is pretty cool. I really like the volume knob on this. The only problem I have with this device is that its gain is too high for, I found like a lot of application, and not too high, but it's high enough that I barely use any of the volume range, and that to me is a little frustrating. So that's just something to note, and there is some pretty significant channel imbalance like right at the bottom end of that. So if you have really sensitive IEMs, I could see this not working for you just because the gain is really high and that channel imbalance is down at the bottom. But other than that, like general use of this thing is pretty excellent. It's got kind of a weird USB situation where like you plug this long cable into here, so you've got like a USB-A male jack on the back of it, which is it's an interesting approach. I didn't have any problem with it, and actually I have like a little iPhone dongle, which you know what? Let me just go grab that real fast. It'd probably make most sense. Okay, so I have this little OTG iPhone dongle, and I can link this little guy below, but it actually works really well with the Hip-dac because it fits like right into there, and then you just put your phone on top of it like that, and that's like a really nice compact system, whereas otherwise you're adapting, and then you get this long thing, and then that goes in there, which I mean, it's okay if you're not moving around a whole lot, but it is a little bit wonky to have like something like this with adapters and things like that going into it. So just something to be aware of when you're using this. Now, this, like I said, is actually very similar with features as far as the Zen DAC, except it is not to be used as like a preamp out. So there's no RCAs out or anything like that. I mean, I suppose you could adapt the 3.5 or the 4.4 balanced in that regard, but then you're double amping, which is kind of frowned upon. So I think if you're using this, it's for just headphones. You're not trying to use it with any other amps or any other speakers or anything like that, whereas the Zen DAC, you can. But this does still retain the power match and the bass boost. So again, pretty similar as far as those two things go. One thing that I want to note when talking about both of these devices is with these two features like the power match and the true bass, I would just say that I don't use them, and I personally, they're not for me. I find the true bass, although a lot of people do really like it, I know, and then a lot of people use it. For me, I thought it was a bit much, even though it's one of the tamer bass boosts that are out there. I still never found I preferred it on, although that might be something that you could get used to, or if you had a really bass light headphone, that might be something that you want to try from time to time. But it wasn't for me. The power match feature, I never thought really showed any major improvements with any various pairings that I tried with it. So I pretty much just left that alone as well, and I just used them in their stock form. So just something to note, maybe you'd find an application for those features, but I didn't find them particularly useful. Obviously, the Hip-dac is much smaller, but you lose that, external amp capabilities. So let's talk about the sound between these two, because they don't sound the same. They are pretty different in their presentation of music, whereas the Zen DAC is a little more laid back, a little bit looser, and what I think is a little bit less defined and resolving. I found the Hip-dac to be like a little bit punchier and a little more exciting and engaging to listen to. And I felt that the Hip-dac had better resolution capabilities and detail retrieval capabilities than the Zen DAC had. Now, I don't know exactly why this is. That doesn't seem to quite make sense to me, but I think it may be because I was running the Zen DAC just off of power from the device. I wonder how that would change if I got, an external power supply, if that would improve the sound and tighten things up and resolve things a little bit better on the Zen DAC. That would be interesting to find out. The problem is the power adapter, the IFI one specifically, is like $50, which is like almost double the cost of the device to begin with, which seems a little pricey to me. I did see some that you could use probably for about like $12 or so on Amazon, but again, I don't know the quality of those and things like that. But I didn't get around to picking one of those up because I decided I wasn't going to keep the Zen DAC. Now, so if it's a straight up sound pick for me, I'm gonna pick the Hip-dac like every time over the Zen DAC. I would say that both of these devices, if your headphones aren't terribly demanding, they actually have pretty similar power output as is. And for me, I thought they drove everything pretty well that I did, with the exception of the Beyerdynamic DT1990 Pro, which I didn't think sounded good on these at all, because I didn't think they could drive those. But my 660S, they drive just fine. My LCD2 Pre-Phaser, they drive just fine. The Alexa that I have drives just fine off of any of these. But I would say that the higher end headphones you go with, the more apparent the limitations are of these devices, especially if you've got something like a Magnus over here like I have. I was kind of going back and forth a little bit, and it's pretty clear, that that's a more capable amplifier in that regard, which of course it should be, but it is noticeable difference. One thing that I found was that the Zen DAC, like the actual DAC portion of the Zen DAC, I think is quite good. And I really heard no discernible difference compared to my SU8, which in itself retails for about twice what this does. But I thought the DAC performance was just fine for the IFI Zen DAC. One big thing to note is that, especially if you're going to try to run it with either a phone or an iPad, is there was like a noticeable noise when powering it through OTG, which isn't really surprising considering, like an iPad isn't really made to power like a device like this or an iPhone. So that's notable. But again, I imagine that would actually go away if you used an external power supply. So something to keep in mind in that regard. So final thoughts here. I think both of these are actually pretty compelling devices at their price points. I think for $100, I don't know if I'd spend $150 new on a Hip-dac, but if you can pick one up used for $100, which I see them going pretty regularly for that, I think this is a great little portable amp that could really be your full desktop amp. You just have the option to charge it through USB-C and get a few hours battery life out of it if you want to move away from your desk for a little bit. So I really like this if all you want to do is drive headphones. The Zen DAC for me is a tougher sell as far as like using it as a headphone amp. I personally felt like the definition was low enough and the bass uncontrolled enough that I don't think I'd be happy using this as a headphone amp consistently. However, if you're looking to kind of get something and then upgrade to like the Zen Can DAC or excuse me, Zen Can amp or another type of $100 amplifier or something like that, then I think the Zen DAC becomes a pretty good proposition, because you can start off with it, you get a very capable DAC, and you do get the ability to listen to headphones and have the preamp ability. And then, you know, when you can afford it, you could move up to a higher quality amp, but still use this as your DAC, which I think is a pretty cool value proposition. I also think for this price, like if it was between, say, this guy and like the FiiO K5 Pro, which I tried out, I think I would much rather take the Zen DAC. I found the K5 Pro to be a little sharp for me, and the Zen DAC's definitely a little bit easier to listen to, in my opinion. So yeah, both I think decent devices for their prices. It just depends on your application. Just like I said, the Zen DAC, there are maybe like a couple of things that might be deal breakers in there for you. And the Hip-dac, there's also, you know, that imbalance in the high gain, which might be an issue for you as well. Again, these would be like entry-level devices. I would say there is a noticeable quality improvement over something like the Ear Studio ES100 with both of these devices, I would say. But there's also, you know, a step up in this little guy, which is the Chord Mojo, which I just got. And spoiler alert, this is going to be the one that I keep for all these things. So this is going to be my portable solution. This thing sounds amazing. I will review it in the future, but yeah, this would be a step up from that, as would, you know, an actual desktop setup with a separate amp and DAC unit. I hope that tells you a little bit about these two IFI products and whether they might suit your needs. If you felt like I missed something, you know, certainly feel free to drop it down in the comments below, and I will try to respond to you in kind. I do really appreciate you tuning in, and you know, if I helped you out, consider giving me a like. And if you want more videos like this in the future about headphones and amps and DACs and things like that, please consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, I will see you later.